I want to talk about this idea of framing and assemblage, and I mentioned before this idea of the frame, which we can think of at a banal level as a picture frame that frames a picture, and a picture was always intended to be framed and to stay within the boundaries of its frame. Of course, in modern art, the frame became irrelevant, and it was then a question of how you break the frame, or how you have the frame but not have the frame. There's a whole dialogue about that in painting. Essentially, the frame is a limiting condition. It puts boundaries on something, but it also enables something to occur within those boundaries. It sets the rules of engagement. And in cinema, what is often more important than what's going on screen is what's going on off screen, what you can hear but not see, what you can see but not hear. So it's the play with the boundaries, the limits of the frame, that are significant in a lot of great films. And I think it's also the case in architecture. You can hear somebody ferreting around outside. You can't see them. That actually amplifies the disruptive character of that moment. Or you could have a view of something that you can see but not hear. That creates a connection which is also a disconnection. A viewing of something that is also a sense of being apart from it. So playing with the frame and what it can do is one aspect. The other is that the frame collects a certain series of elements within it. And it's the manner in which you activate and mobilize the energies and the potential of those things to begin to combine within the frame that determines your agency as a filmmaker or as an architect. So if you're working in an urban context, you map out what's existing, where people are moving, what are the particular conditions that are important or interesting or productive in that setting. You map those out, you understand them. They form an assemblage. Now you say, all right, I'm going to intervene in this environment. I'm going to make a wall or a building or a shelter or whatever it is. And in that intervention, I'm going to use the opportunity to allow what intervenes to begin to make relationships between those existing things so that they begin to work better, so that they begin to work more powerfully, so that in a sense you amplify the social benefits of that urban context. So that's the role for architecture. It's about framing, but that doesn't mean imprisoning and putting in a cell. It actually means beginning to activate the inherent potential of a situation. Probably 17th, 18th century architecture of East Central China. These are agricultural buildings recreated in Beijing in a park, which I loved. This fantastic place, which is a kind of threshold space. It's up above the ground because it's an agricultural environment, and so the ground is used for storage and for stock, etc. It's an intermediate space between the inside and the outside. It's a space that is to do with the edge. It's a place of negotiating boundary conditions, of entry and exit, of welcoming and farewelling, of pausing, of waiting while the rain finishes so that you can then go back out and work the land, or of sitting and having your lunch there, or of sleeping on a hot afternoon or whatever. All of those conditions, which are edge conditions, edge activities that we all know about, because in a sense all of our lives are spent trying to maximize our edge activities and not our central activities. You want to maximize the edge opportunities of holidays and free time because they're the times that you enjoy the most. These are all to do with breaking boundaries, of testing the limits of something. And in this building, the limit, the edge, the frame, if you like, of the space is one that is full of potential, of programmatic potential. Hitchcock's Rear Window, the story, this fellow, he's a photographer, so he's a viewer, he's a gazer, he's broken his leg and he's stuck in his chair in his apartment. All he can do is look out of that window every day. It's an entirely artificial set. You can see the city there in the background, made as a kind of model. And he looks out into the apartments of all of his neighbours and follows the stories of what they're all doing. He uses binoculars to get up close, and then he notices something that maybe he shouldn't have noticed. This is him realizing that he is a voyeur. Him realizing that his gaze is dangerous. So Hitchcock marks that moment, and what he sees is he sees this fellow, Raymond Burr, entering his apartment. He notices that he and his wife, who's in a few rooms away, are not having such a good relationship. That Raymond Burr, this guy in blue, who looks like a very serious fellow, might be a criminal. And his wife is ill and might become a victim. And he uses the fact of these windows, and in particular the gaps between them, to heighten dramatic tension. So you see the man appear in the first frame, he goes through into the second frame, which is the kitchen, then he moves into the main frame, which is the living room, and each time he leaves something behind, so he will take his coat off. Then he goes into the bedroom, where the wife is in bed, incapacitated in some way, they have an argument. Then later Raymond Burr notices that he's being looked at and the blinds come down. Hitchcock sets up these 4 frames and he tells a little mini story about what's going on between these people through those frames, but in particular through the breaks, the gaps between the frames. Because it's the gaps between the frames that heighten the drama. He's coming in, he takes his coat off. What's going to happen? She's looking agitated. Something happens at that threshold that amplifies the moment. At a particular moment when the blinds are drawn, James Stewart falls asleep and doesn't notice the man and the woman leaving the apartment together. When he wakes up, the blinds are drawn and he sees the man coming back and loading a suitcase, and he thinks that the man has murdered his wife. The whole premise of the film is the fact that you know that he probably didn't. You don't absolutely know, but you know that he probably didn't. He is absolutely sure that the man killed his wife. He is noticed as a voyeur by the man, who then threatens him, and the entire drama of the film is set up by that discrepancy between what you know and what the characters know, what you see and what you don't see. This is a minor scene from not a great film, but I think a very, very powerful film of its time. It's Elia Kazan's adaptation of Tennessee Williams' play Baby Doll. This young woman, she's coming of age, is betrothed to a man, but the marriage is some way off, and she lives halfway between the kind of seductive potential of her as a woman and the childish infant stage of pre-womanhood, if you like. And so stuck between the two, she is very powerful as a woman, but also very susceptible. This is her playroom come bedroom. During the course of the film, her husband-to-be burns down the gin mill, the cotton mill, of a rival owner, who is this man on the left in black. She doesn't know that. He's not sure, but he suspects that her husband did it, so he comes to visit and to try and find out whether there's any truth in his hunch. Now the whole scene happens around the frame of this swing. He comes to visit, she's not sure why he's come. Nevertheless, he suggests that they sit in the swing. The swing is a kind of childhood, playful structure that you associate with naivety and fun. But what takes place in the frames of this swing is anything but funny or naive. She's dressed in a kind of polka dot white. He's dressed in black with a black hat and a black moustache and a serious looking belt. And so Kazan establishes the relationship between the two of them, the black clothing over and against the white clothing, the threat over and against the threatened, and the frame which allows him to mobilize the power of that scene. So in this frame, she's sitting on her seat. He decides, oh, why don't I sit next to you? It's a nice hot day, we can have some conversation. So he sits next to her and he grabs the rail which is on her side. She is forced against the back. She can't go any further. She enters into this triangular frame, separated from him by this vertical hanging element that he holds. He also now holds her, so she's trapped. He begins to talk, they have a conversation. She's unsure, sometimes she's shocked by why he's there and what might happen. Sometimes she's not sure whether she's actually enjoying it. And he is still on the right-hand side of this. She's uncertain as to whether she would like to proceed. Now she doesn't like the idea, now she does like the idea. His hand comes right into her frame, and now his face with the moustache and the threatening hat and everything, and the hand around the neck. So it's absolutely about entrapment and violation. She's still interested, but decides not to, and so has to squeeze between him and the frame to escape. So what has he done? He's used the frame of the image through this kind of armature or apparatus of the swing as a way of really heightening the relationship, the power relationship, the gender relationships between these two characters, and in so doing to bring the drama to really amplify the dramatic moment. And my contention is that that is a potential for architecture, to use geometry, form, framing, sighting, materials, light, sound, or access to sound, smell, etc., etc., as a way of setting up a charged environment or milieu in which the various activities of human beings come to be foregrounded and the significance of those activities come to be amplified and heightened. That architecture can do this in the same way that cinema does it dramatically. Architecture can also dramatize the human experience of being together in this place to a very high degree. Thank you.